Can we move this so this is doesn't exist? It's fine.
Introductions in 5 minutes, okay?
Wait, are you introducing us or are we introducing ourselves?
You will be introducing yourself.
Okay, cool.
So, I mean,
Good to know.
with projects and everything coming up. We're going to start with introductions. We're going to start with the ACEC committee, and then we're going to go into introductions for the candidates. So I am Alex White. I will be your moderator tonight.
I'm Chester. I'll be the timer for today.
Hi everyone, my name is Abir Saida and I am running for president.
My name is Sam Marlowe, and I'm running as her vice president.
And my name is Cameron Hall. I'm running for MSA president.
And my name is Nidhi Khurana, and I am running for vice president.
Great, thank you candidates for those introductions. We're just going to go over some general rules real quick, just so everybody knows what the rules will be. First of all, there will be absolutely no personal attacks. We want to have this debate be solely about how you can help our university. The side to answer first will be determined by a coin flip. Abir and Sam will be going first. Following questions will be answered by alternating sides. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and a warning will be given with 30 seconds left, and we also have a 1-minute warning as well. Rebuttals will follow each potentially debatable question, but limited to 2 minutes, and we will also be giving you warnings when those end as well. And then audience, please refrain from clapping or cheering for the candidates until the debate has concluded. All right, overall we will have 8 questions directed towards the presidential candidates, Abir and Cam, and 3 questions directed towards the vice presidential candidates, Sam and Nidhi. They can collaborate on their answers for the rebuttals. However, Abir and Cam must answer the questions for the presidents, and Sam and Nidhi must answer the questions directed towards the vice presidents. All right, and then we hope you all submitted questions. We will be going through those very shortly, and we will be asking them to the candidates later on. All right, Abir, please start with you guys' opening statements.
Also a question for that too, can we have both people doing the opening statement? Great, cool. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Hi everyone, my name is Abir. Like I said, I'm currently the student body vice president at the University of Minnesota, and this is Sam. What are you, Sam? Development director.
Oh God. I'm currently the development director for the Minnesota Student Association.
And we've spent the last 3 years of our undergraduate careers advocating for students' needs. We are passionate and incredibly imperfect people who've learned a lot and have plenty more to learn. But we're also committed to growing ourselves and student government further into a representative, productive, inclusive, collaborative, and very healthy body of student leaders. In the Minnesota Student Association, we lead large teams and push some of the biggest organizational initiatives. In the past, this has included the urgent prioritization of mental health on campus. Some of our successes with that, as you all have probably seen, the How Are You campaign, thanks to Emma Mazur, wherever she is. That was her initiative. We've expanded counselors, temporary counselors, and permanent counselors for Boynton mental health. We've increased sexual assault prevention programming and policies like affirmative consent, as well as securing funding for a male engagement coordinator at the Aurora Center. We've done legislative advocacy around tuition and affordability. So we went to the Big Ten and we had a Big Ten-wide lobbying initiative. Just Tuesday, we were over at the Capitol talking to legislators about funding the university. And there's been so much work done with us in the Minnesota Student Association, from our team to our committee directors, et cetera. And we've also made some mistakes that we are learning from.
There isn't a question that in the past, students have not been in the forefront of people's minds, specifically administrators. As you can see from mental health, from sexual assault, from the tuition hike, from the conversations this morning with the Board of Regents, it is our job and it is our philosophy to have transparency between students and administrators. That is exactly what we want to do. We want to be sitting next to the Board of Regents, in front of them, hearing what they have to say, and in return, continue that voice for students and being a true representative. I encourage you all, whether it's presidential and vice presidential candidates, everyone that is running in the all-campus elections, to look at their track record, to see what have they been doing work in the past in their current undergraduate careers. And it's clear that me and Abir have continued that work. So thank you.
All right. First off, thank you, ACEC. Thank you to everyone here in the audience, and thank you to everybody who is watching the live stream online or watching it on playback. My name's Cam Hall. I'm a junior. I'm studying history, philosophy, and political science in the College of Liberal Arts. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, why did you come to the university? It's almost always the question I get when I tell people that I'm from Richmond. And the biggest thing was I wanted to be at a big school in a big city. But I have a lot of family ties here too. Both my parents went to the U, and I have grown up being a Gopher sports fan and pretty much just love it here. I'm going to talk a little bit first about my background. Like I said, I've been involved for MSA for 3 years. I'm a 2-term CLA student senator. My freshman year, I represented the Middlebrook Hall student group, so it was really cool to have like that introductory experience of representing 900 students as a freshman. I worked on different initiatives, including just this past year, I was one of the co-authors on the rewrite of the 9/11 resolution. I know that was a big thing in campus news and even got some national attention. But outside of MSA, I was an orientation leader for the class of 2019, and I got to orient hundreds of new students to campus. I've been super involved in my fraternity, Beta Theta Pi, where I've held 2 different positions on our executive committee and have really shown some leadership in that organization outside of student government. Besides that, I'm on the University Student Legal Service Board. I'm currently the Education Outreach Chair, so I've got experience marketing student groups and campus resources to the broader campus community. And just for fun, I play intramural volleyball, and I'm a member of the juggling club too. I want to talk for a moment about why I'm running for student body president. It's been something that I've wanted to get involved in since I came to the university. It's been an awesome experience being a part of student government for so long, and it's been cool to see the changes that have taken place on campus. Everything from tangible changes like bus routes being updated to better affect what students' priorities are, to seeing bike racks that weren't there 3 years ago that I know that we lobbied to get there, and then seeing the broader policy changes too, like affirmative consent, or seeing publicity campaigns that MSA has put on. And being a part of those too, like in terms of the campus safety one my freshman year, like seeing your picture on a poster saying like, hey, we want campus to be safer. That's been a really cool experience that I've had. And so over the course of my 3 years here at the university, I've wanted to become more involved and give other students the opportunity to have the experience that I've had, to get involved in student government, to get involved on campus, to be a caring and contributing member of the campus community. And that's why I'm running. I truly believe that Nydia and my leadership would be the best for student government and would be the best thing for students.
Sorry. Hi, guys. Like I said, my name's Nydia Karana. I am an econ poli-sci double major. And, you know, honestly, there's collectively 9 years of MSA experience on this stage. There's 3, there's 3, there's 3, and then I have none. I am the only outsider in this race. I'm the only person who hasn't been actively involved in the organization, and I think that that is something that lends an interesting perspective in this race, because most of the students at the university haven't been active members in MSA. Which means that my experience, my leadership, my political connections really have come externally. I started lobbying when I was 14 years old. I took an intensive training program back home in Missouri under Governor Nixon. And do we have 6 minutes total? Because he has 3. You had
3 minutes total.
yeah.
3 minutes per candidate team.
That's definitely not what you said.
We will let you finish your
Okay.
introduction. I'm sorry that there was no clarification there.
Okay, cool. Anyways, so I spent, 3 years there. And then when I came back to campus, came to college, I worked for Representative Keith Ellison, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Governor Mark Dayton. And when I was working for Mark Dayton, I developed these relationships with senators and representatives on the Hill, and that, I think, really is going to lend a better perspective on how the university really does lobbying. And I think that that sort of experience is going to be beneficial with Cam's internal MSA experience and my external political connections. Thank you.
Great, thank you, you guys. All right, so we will go into our first question. For this question, you will have 2 minutes per team, and there will be no rebuttals for this. These questions are meant for the presidential candidates. Abir, what unique quality would you bring to MSA that would assist you in your advocacy for university students?
I think there are a couple things that Sam and I individually, as well as a team, bring together that I think are going to be incredibly important for MSA moving forward, and also implementing those and institutionalizing those. For one, we have a ton of experience, and that's actually something I don't really passionately care about. The idea of experience to me is something that's often used as a way of keeping people out, but I do think it is important for understanding that we are able to navigate the systems that this university has created to keep people like us out, which is normally students, everyday students, who don't know how to figure out everything we want to do and how to get it done at this university. And we really strongly believe that our job is to guide every student regardless of their issue in figuring that out. So I think that's pretty critical. That and the fact that since we have experience, we've made mistakes and we've learned from them. Not to say that not everyone has made mistakes, but we really have taken the time. I've been vice president. I've screwed up many times and I've learned. Diversity is another thing that for those of you who know, I very strongly and passionately care about making sure new people are in the organization, and that's something that we bring as a team as well as in our supporters. And most importantly, something that I feel really excited about working with Sam is that we're two really different people. We have the same music taste, but aside from that, she listens to the same hip hop, but aside from that, she is really my opposite in a beautiful way. I am a strategic person, she's a developmental person. I'm all about execution, she's all about uplifting, and together she strengthens my weaknesses, and I think I do the same, so.
Great, thank you. And Cam, same question. What unique quality would you bring to MSA that would assist you in your advocacy for university students?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. So first, I want to talk a little bit about my personal leadership style. It's challenging the process. As any of my orientation leader friends last summer can attest, I definitely sometimes like to fight against and change what's going on in the current organization. That's my type of leadership, if you will. I think that's really, really important for advocacy for students. I think that right now, we need to be doing a better job of cooperating with the administration, but also pushing them and challenging them to take student voices seriously. And additionally, I can't answer this question fully without giving credit to Nidhi and her lobbying experience. The way that she's been involved in political campaigns, and especially here in the state of Minnesota at the state capitol, is something that really can't go overlooked. Based on her experience from Missouri, her experience working with Governor Dayton and focusing on transportation policy when she was there, there's really nobody that I have more faith in to be the voice of the students at the state capitol. I think that that's something that we really have a very strong background in. But additionally, I think that one of my talents is I'm a very professional and managerial person. I think that MSA would benefit very well from a more professional atmosphere. I think that right now the campus culture of MSA can be a lot of times feels more like a student group than a professional student government. So that's something that we really want to focus on, changing that culture, making sure that the most qualified person is the person that gets the job and not necessarily the person that we personally like the most. And so I think that's another area where our strengths would lend to be the best advocates for students.
Great, thank you. We will go on to question number 2. Along with this, along with question number 1, there are no rebuttals required for this question as well, and these will be directed towards the presidential candidates. Abir, what are the 3 most important changes that should be made on campus to improve student welfare?
Student welfare holistically needs to be improved. So there's a lot of aspects to it. For those of you who've worked in housing, we have like the well-being models of like financial, social, economic, whatever. Student well-being holistically is what Sam and I are focused on, and we think those intersect really well with some of the initiatives that we would like to bring forward. So social well-being, physical well-being, and mental well-being really broadly are things that we are concerned with. Initiative-wise, the top priority right now is mental health. Thankfully, President Kaler now agrees that this is the crisis on campus that needs to be fixed. And by fixed, I don't mean everyone needs to be neurotypical, but what I mean is that we need to have access to Boynton now. We need to have students following up from their first appointments. Right now, most students that go to Boynton only have 1 appointment and they don't return, and that's very concerning to me. So that's number one. Our social well-being really needs to focus on a variety of things, including our campus life programs. We have a lot of awesome programs at this university that promote the well-being of us socially, but we also have a college campus culture. I am someone who feels really strongly that a lot of things that happen when 18 to 22-year-olds are conglomerated into this space together can be unhealthy, and we need to have a conversation about how to have socially healthy lives. And then finally, physical well-being, and that includes everything from infrastructure to safety. So whether that's increasing disability access, whether that's increasing lighting in the neighborhoods, all of these things are critical to all types of safety, and there are a variety of initiatives that we need to take place for them.
Great, thank you. And on to the same question. What are the 3 most important changes that should be made on campus to improve student welfare?
Absolutely. So the way that Nidhi and I have kind of broken it down is the same one that's on our website. We think that mental health awareness and resources is one of the biggest things that we can change and that MSA has an impact on for improving student welfare. Additionally, keeping the cost of college down, whether that's through the student service fees process, whether that's lobbying to keep the tuition down for out-of-state students and in-state students, those are another major key thing to improve student welfare. And finally, we think that sexual assault prevention and awareness of the resources and how to be an active bystander needs to be made more of a priority to improve student welfare. We've outlined in our month-by-month plan how we want to tackle some of these issues. We think that MSA should have a focus year-round on these issues since all of them affect student welfare. So we don't want to be only focusing on one thing at a time for 1 month of the year. What we mean by that is in our mental health plan, we think that when midterms come around, when students start getting very stressed out, when the wait times start going up, we think we should be focusing on that mental health plan. At the beginning of the school year, I guess last school year, there were 600 women who reported sexual assault and 100 men here on our own campus. And we think that number is too high. So starting in September, from the very first chance that students get to campus, we want to be prioritizing sexual assault, and that would improve student welfare. We want to make sure that students understand the resources that are available to them here on campus, how to recognize situations that they can stop and step in to make a change. And finally, we want to lobby year-round for keeping the cost of college down, and that's something that we think we have a great background and experience to do.
Great, thank you. And we are now on to question 3. Rebuttals for this question are recommended, however, are not required. We will start with the presidential candidates. Javier, should the university only contract with businesses that have demonstrated sustainable and ethical practices?
I think that question is interesting because I think students can have a collective opinion about what the university should and shouldn't do, and I don't think there's anyone who's going to say we shouldn't be looking for ethical and sustainable businesses, because absolutely we should. But we do have to be collaborative if we were to create some kind of standing policy about who the university does business with, which right now we have policies that recommend ethical and sustainable investments, ethical and sustainable collaboration, but we have nothing that requires it. Do I think the university should be doing ethical and sustainable things? Absolutely. Do I have different interpretations of what that might mean from the other students or maybe from faculty and administration and all these other folks? Probably. So the long story short is yes, we should be doing business with sustainable and ethical folks. What that looks like needs to be interpreted collaboratively if we're going to draw a hard line on what that means.
Great, thank you. And Cam, same question. Should the university only contract with businesses that have demonstrated sustainable and ethical practices?
Yeah, so I think to us, it seems like it is kind of an obvious answer. Yes, we don't want to be doing business with, or we don't want to have contracts with businesses that aren't sustainable and ethical. But personally, Nidhi and I think that it's a little bit beyond the scope of MSA. And what I mean by that is, in what way does that really impact the day-to-day lives of students? Because that's a question I think that we see as the driving question for what MSA should be involved in, what we should be taking stances on, how we want to deal with issues that affect students. The administration here is large, it's cumbersome, and it's difficult to make change happen fast. In terms of the capital that MSA has to spend, we don't think that focusing on making sure that every contract the university has being sustainable and ethical is necessarily the best way and the best use of MSA's time and resources. We think that we should be focusing more on the issues that we've outlined just prior about improving lives, improving student lives here on campus, and that would be a much better use of MSA's capital and resources.
Great, thank you. Sam a chance for rebuttal.
Just one quick point. I think it's absolutely valid to say that there are things that folks feel like are higher priorities for MSA to focus its energy and resources on. That doesn't mean that we don't deserve a seat at the table. We are 25% of the stakeholdership at the university, so would I spend that being my priority up at the top? Absolutely not. I'm not going to make that something that the organization, and I don't think Sam would say the same, that we would put the organization's time and resources into entirely. However, anything that the university is doing, we're a part of. I mean, we fund this university. We are a part of the stakeholdership. We should at least be allowed to give some kind of feedback, and when we have policy processes that exist, and we'd just like a seat at the table.
Great, thank you. And Cam and Nitty, time for rebuttal.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty much on the same page here. That students should be able to have a voice in the administration, make sure that there's no egregious offenses, or if I think additionally a particular group of students is abnormally affected by the university's business practices, then there needs to be a change, and that's something that we should be focusing on. What I meant to say earlier is that it's not in our minds the top priority for MSA because it doesn't directly affect the day-to-day lives of students.
Great, thank you. We will go on to question number 4. Again, rebuttals are recommended, however, not required. We will start with a beer. In the face of rising student costs, should MSA leaders accept lesser stipends and advocate for heads of the university administration to do the same?
So heads of the university administration get salaries, and most people who are vice provosts or vice presidents of any department at this university have a 6-figure salary, and I could list a couple off the top of my head immediately. On the contrast, the highest paid person in student government is the president, followed by the vice president, and I currently make about $500 a month, which barely covers my rent. We feel very strongly, and we have advocated for the past very strongly, that it is critical that students be given access the way the rest of the university stakeholders are to be able to participate in things that make a difference in this university. So when faculty want to go to the faculty thing that happens, it's a consultative committee, but that sounds annoying. When they go to these types of things and they want to go give their words, they can get out of class. They're accommodated for. All of these things are taken care of. Students, on the other hand, my grades are suffering right now. They have suffered in the past. The president, who's right, Joelle, the president right now, everything of hers is suffering because we're not accommodated for. And our Big Ten counterparts of student governments get significantly more accommodations to be leaders. But the bigger point about our stipends too is this is how you all get to hold us accountable. Because when we don't do our job, there is an external committee that slashes our stipends and says you weren't doing it. When I entered MSA, there were a lot of people making a lot of money that were not doing their jobs. Most importantly, though, we are not comparable to the salaries of the higher ups of this university. We are called out all the time for having one of the biggest disparities between salaries and wages of any university, any public institution in the country. President Kaler gets called out on this all the time. Student leaders, we aren't on the same page. I'm in debt, so my monthly stipend that keeps me in MSA and allows me to advocate for the student body, and what Sam's stipend is right now is going to allow us to keep going. That cannot be said and is not the same for our higher-ups in administration.
Great, thank you. And Cam, same question. In the face of rising student costs, should some MSA leaders accept lesser stipends and advocate for heads of university administration to do the same?
When Nidhi and I were meeting with one of the student groups that we were outreaching to, we got the question, how are you going to make your policy goals happen? Are you going to push it through committees? Are you going to just talk about it a lot? Are you going to partner with other groups to get it done? And the answer that I didn't give at the time, but that I thought of after the fact, was there are $44,000 that go towards stipends every year in MSA. Every single student pays about $350 a semester directly to student government, or a little bit less than that. If we can't make mental health better for students on campus, if we can't keep the cost of college down, if we can't prevent and raise awareness about sexual assault for $44,000, then student government is broken. We think that the stipends are necessary. The amount of time that student leaders put in MSA is astronomical. And I mean, if you broke it down into how much you're making per hour or whatever you wanted it's really not significant. But at the same time, we think that amount of money, those resources that students contribute to student government, should be used effectively. And so I think in terms of the leadership stipends for MSA, I think they're sufficient, and I think that they should be used to get the job done. In terms of administration, I think cost needs to be slashed, and I think that much is clear. I think the administration is definitely bloated, and that keeps the cost of college up for students. And so while Caleb pledged to cut $90 million a few years ago, that's really not enough, and I think that there needs to be more done there, and we should definitely be advocating for that as well.
Great, thank you. Abir and Sam, time for rebuttal.
Students currently pay over $600 for student services fees, and these fees are directly allocated by students for student services. So there's two aspects of that. There are the student groups that are just kind of understood as student groups, and then there are these campus life programs that include things like Boynton and Aurora. And then we have tuition, and tuition money, along with a variety of other things, including donations, go into a different pool of money called the cost pool. And that's where a variety of departments from the university, including the salaries of a lot of our administrators, come from. $44,000 this year, I don't actually know if that's the exact number, but something around that line went to stipends. Students don't pay $3 to MSA, they paid $2 and about 81 or 84 cents, something like that. And of that, a couple cents go to someone like me or to someone like Sam. On the contrary, we have zero understanding of how much of our tuition dollars go to the $625,000 that President Kaler makes or the $100,000 that the Vice Provosts make. What we're advocating for is a focus on transparency and being able to advocate for ourselves properly, not limiting how students can do their jobs. We also believe that all student leaders should be given access to leadership roles, whether that means a stipend, whether that means internship credits for the leadership roles that you're partaking in, anything like that. Why aren't we being accommodated the way all these other bodies are? That's what's critical to us. And it is used effectively. All of our stipends get cut immediately the second I don't show up for office hours, stipend cut. I'm not talking to the people I'm supposed to, stipend cut. If I'm not showing up to committee and I'm a committee director, cut. Those go away like this, and that's how we keep people accountable.
Great, thank you. Cam and Nidhi, time for rebuttal.
Yeah, I would just like to clarify, $44,000 is the exact amount that was dedicated to stipends this past year. And with that, we just think that the IMC, so the Internal Management Committee, which is the one that cuts and charges stipends, we do think that that should be expanded as well. And I think that's another measure of transparency, and that their report to Forum should be also a little bit more publicized, I think, too, because that allows for more students to be aware of what student leaders are doing and what kind of jobs that they're working on. So.
Great, thank you. All right, we will go on to question 5. Again, rebuttals are recommended, however not required. We'll start with the presidential candidate here. What can be done to address inadequate university resources for students with mental health issues?
Loaded question. Addressing mental health issues on campus is hard. Like TLDR of this entire situation is that we everyone in this room wants to fix mental health disparities on this campus. The problem is literally funding and who's prioritizing it, excuse me. So right now, Boynton Mental Health is strapped beyond belief, as is student counseling services. If any of you have ever been to student counseling services, you'll notice pretty quickly how strained they are right now. And the problem is that the funding that they're getting is not flexible, in addition to the fact that the people who could provide more flexibility seem to not care enough, or at least haven't. Recently, apparently, all the noise that we've been making has been causing a shift in mindset and all these types of things. And that's critical because Boynton can't hire more counselors, they can't hire diverse counselors, they can't expand their spaces, they can't follow up with students, they can't make sure insurance is being taken care of unless they have the money to do it. On the contrary, too, one thing to note, in contrast to, one thing to note is that student counseling services is also funded by fees. And that is important because right now, student counseling services doesn't require that you show insurance, which is really critical for a lot of us. I don't know how many of you are out there, but the stigma that exists around mental health makes it so I don't need my parents knowing that I'm going to counseling. That's just not something I'm going to deal with right now. And that's critical. Someone needs to be in charge of figuring that out. We have a 5-point mental health plan that we started. We've expanded counselors. We want to get all of it done. But until somebody in administration takes charge, nothing is going to happen. And that is the #1 priority. Because how are students supposed to advocate for mental health if some of us can't even get out of bed in the morning because we have depression and we have anxiety? I have anxiety right now. Like I'm sniffing this eucalyptus mint to keep myself calm. And it's critical that we we hold those folks accountable to find the solution. It's not our job. And we will yell and we will bust down the door and we will make sure they make public statements of support. Thank you.
Cam, same question. What can be done to address inadequate university resources for students with mental health issues?
So I'd like to start by telling a bit of a personal story. Growing up, one of my parents has severe depression, and it greatly affected my life to the point that it really, I think, shaped who I am as a person. When I didn't want to necessarily go home from school some days because I know that I would get in a fight with my mom, it made a huge impact on me. And it's continued here at college. I struggle with depression myself. I have been through the gauntlet of resources that come with dealing with mental health problems here on campus. I've been to student counseling services myself. I've been to the DRC. It's something that really affects students here. And it's something that can't be overlooked. And the way that Nidhi and I think the best way of going about this issue is multifold. First off, we think that Boynton, when we sat down with Boynton likes being funded by student service fees. That's what they told us. They appreciated the fact that they get to work closely with students. They are accountable to students. And while they want more funding, and they would like to lobby for more administrative unit funding from student service fees, that's how they like to be funded. They liked dealing with students because then that holds them accountable and holds them to be transparent. When we sat down with student counseling services today, they aren't funded by student service fees. And they said that for them, having the ability to hire more counselors is the biggest thing that can help reduce wait time. So working with them, working with either the Student Service Fees Committee or the administrative unit responsible for working with student counseling services or the DRC are very important ways that we can change that. But that's not where it should end. We think that a 1-month publicity campaign is not sufficient in terms of what MSA can do. We think that our resources should be used to partner with groups like De-Stress, and thank you.
All right. We're on to question number 6. Rebuttals again are recommended, however, not required. Or not rebutted. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, please rebuttal if you're going to say.
Cam, I really appreciate your perspective, and I think that's very valuable. Just to make a note, I think we all have some sort of perspective and experience as students on how we have experienced mental health issues either in ourselves or fellow students. In the last 2 weeks, I had to deal with 2 sexual suicide warnings issues with 2 of my friends. It is events like this that make you see that you need to know as a leader in this university how to deal with those conversations, putting it into action. We had 4 new counselors this year on putting professionals, adding professionals to our university, and taking the liability out of ourselves into the next steps and taking the university accountable.
And if I can say too, shout out to Dr. Danita Brown-Young and Provost Hansen, because those are administrators who, when we came to their rooms crying and said, we need counselors, we need to figure this out, they listened to students and they gave us results. So we turned around and we got 2 temporary counselors this semester, as well as 2 permanent counselors for Boynton Mental Health, and that is incredible. In addition to the bereavement policy that we've expanded, in addition to the mental health prioritization in our syllabi. Some of you might have noticed in the last few semesters that mental health is now included in your syllabi. Those are critical things, and we have to thank the administrators who are working with us, and again, ensure that we're holding accountable the ones who aren't.
Great, thank you. And rebuttal from Cam and Nidhi.
Make it work. Cool. All right, so while we think that the administration needs to acknowledge that mental health is an issue, a demand is not a policy. And we think that we need to have tangible, actionable items to actually fix mental health issues. And that being said, there is no blanket solution for how we're going to solve this crisis that's affecting campuses. But we can take step-by-step approaches to try and solve it, to try and fix it just a little bit, to try and make life a little bit better. And one of the big things that we are pushing for, one thing that we talked to Boynton about, one thing we talked to Student Counseling Services about, was this idea of de-stress. Stress is something that all students have to deal with. Cam, Sam, Abir, and myself, we all deal with it. We're college students. We do a lot of things. And, sometimes how we handle that, how we handle our mental health, how we take care of ourselves, we don't always know how to do that. What resources are we supposed to use? And what Cam and I are proposing is a solution where we have this program that's in Greek chapter houses, that's modeled after the Health Advocates program, that's in residential halls, where it's one person or it's a couple of people who are trained to actually deal with mental health problems and who are able to talk through them with you, who are able to refer you to the proper resources, who are able to actually fix you a little bit.
Great, thank you. We will go on to question 6. Rebuttals again recommended, however not required. Abir, is the affirmative consent policy an effective tool for mitigating the issue of sexual assault on campus?
Affirmative consent challenges some of the disparities that we have in sex ed from K through 12. So sex ed in the United States and probably the rest of the world, but especially in the United States, is not doing an adequate job of talking to us about, in addition to all the varieties of things that involve sex, it's not talking to us about how to respect each other and our bodies. And I don't mean that in terms of they need to tell us how to own our bodies, but we never learn really how to have these conversations and how to be communicative partners. Affirmative consent is a policy, and policies can only do so much. But the great thing about policies, especially policies that cause a lot of attention, is that we go home and we talk about them. And I can speak from experience that having advocated for sexual assault the amount that we did in the last 2 years, especially with passing the affirmative consent policy, we had so many conversations when we went home. I talked to people for hours and hours through the night. I talked to my friends hours and hours through the night, discussing what this means for how we behave and how we treat each other. Yes means yes, there is no gray kind of thing. But we also have to nuance it and understand that a policy alone doesn't solve everything, right? We have to have advocacy and we have to have outreach. So it's incredible and it's been very helpful for our victim survivors to be able to say that they have something that they can count on that is favoring them and not the perpetrator when they go to adjudicate their sexual assault if they so choose. It's not enough, and it's not going to get the entire job done. That's why we go forward and we talk about what no gray is and what that means. We talk about yes means yes. We talk about how to communicate with partners. We talk about healthy sex lives and healthy relationships and healthy romance. Greek Life had this awesome task force that they were working on last year, and they had all of these panels about things like toxic masculinity. Those are the steps that follow policies, and those are critical. So was it effective? Absolutely. Is it enough? No. Campus sexual assault and rape still happen, and we need to work harder.
Great, thank you. Cam, same question. Is the affirmative consent policy an effective tool for mitigating the issue of sexual assault on campus?
At its core, consent is an act of communication. And with that, the affirmative consent policy is a good start.
Just gonna sniff this.
Really sorry about that.
A little bit scary there.
Okay. Are we good to go? Are we good? Okay.
Maybe we should take the break now. Go for it. You got it.
Should we take a quick break? Start over would be good. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna start from the beginning again. So, at its core, consent is an act of communication, and with that, the affirmative consent policy is a great start. It allows for a clear standard in investigations. It provides for a more positive culture around sex and consent, but Nidhi and I think that it needs to be better communicated. Right now, there's been a few publicity campaigns, but in our eyes and in the eyes of a lot of students that we've talked with, the conversations around affirmative consent and sexual assault have stopped. We haven't seen as much from MSA this year as we'd like to see. We think that it needs to be a higher priority. We think it needs to be a conversation that should be continued year-round, not something that comes up for a month. We have great conversations, great town hall events, great screenings of documentaries about. and then forget about. It's something that happens all the time. And so as such, in our month-by-month plan, we focused on it at the beginning, but we bring it up again in February around Valentine's Day so that we can talk about healthy relationships and about what sex culture should really be like on campus, what we want to see, what we want as a group of students. So I think the affirmative consent policy is great. It's doing a lot of good things. It's making for more positive conversations and more effective conversations, but we want to see more.
Thank you. Here and Sam Rebuttal.
I think it's a fair criticism to say that folks feel like maybe MSA hasn't done enough to follow up on affirmative consent. I do want to make a little point. If people are feeling like affirmative consent wasn't talked about enough, especially in the beginning, we had administrators once again interfere with something that wasn't really in their cusp. We had regents who wanted to take affirmative consent after it had been through a 6-month review process, after everyone had made comments, after all stakeholders, including regents, had been consulted, and take it out of the mix. And they wanted to go and they wanted to discuss it. And one of them told us to our faces, this is an actual fact, one of them told members of MSA that they think women lie about sexual assault and they should do more to concern themselves with our male constituents. Also assuming, of course, that affirmative consent doesn't serve men and people of all genders. So there is something to note here in terms of how quickly we were able to turn it around, because they did not want it going on during orientation and welcome week, and thankfully Jenny Porter over at first year orientation and first year programs was able to implement it. The orientation leaders talked all about it. You all were awesome. We have more work to do, and I completely agree, and I think that criticism is fair, so please continue to bring that to us.
Great. Thank you. Pam and Nidhi, rebuttal.
We just want to say again, while we understand that administrators aren't always cooperative, that doesn't mean that we can't still be having these conversations and leading educational advocacy efforts with students, and that's something that we've outlined a very clear plan on our Facebook page about how we want to do that.
Great. Thank you. We will go on to question number 7. Again, rebuttals are recommended, however, not required. Here. What is an appropriate course of action for university administrators to discourage obstructive student protesting in cases in which it indeed merits discouragement?
So I'm just going to repeat that question. What is an appropriate course of action for university administrators to discourage obstructive student protesting in cases in which it indeed merits discouragement? There's 2 problems I have with that question, which is one, that I'm telling you all how I think administration should deal with something, and I can provide my feedback, but I can't tell you what administration's appropriate course of action is. But I think the bigger question here is it's saying, how should we discourage obstructive student protesting in cases where it merits discouragement? Right now, the Student Conduct Code and the Transitioning Student Conduct Code have points about disruptive protest and obstructive means of protesting. I am someone, and anyone who knows me knows this, I believe that disruption is a necessary thing that people do when they feel like their voices aren't being heard. That said, don't put people in danger. Is it a part of the Student Conduct Code right now that you shouldn't be disruptive or obstructive? Yes. And if you do break that, right now the Student Conduct Code will punish you, as we saw with some members of this university community who were put on probation for a year. That isn't restorative justice by any means also. This isn't amending the problem by punishing a student for a year for making a little bit of noise in President Kaler's office or whatever students want to do in a given day. So one of the things we're advocating for is a movement towards a restorative justice model in the Student Conduct Code. This is endorsed by administrators from the General Counsel to Student Legal Services to OSCI, whatever. President Kaler's office has endorsed it. It's a good model, and it is the right model. But more importantly, I'm not going to tell students how they should protest, and I'm not going to tell administrators how they should tell students how they should protest. We, as a student body, can talk to ourselves. We don't need administrators telling us what is discouraged and what is not discouraged, because in my opinion, that can be a little patronizing. If I feel that the way you are protesting is not appropriate, I'll have that conversation with you one-to-one, and I will rebut or rebute whatever what you're doing on my own time. But administrators have a policy. It's there. We'll adjudicate people as necessary.
Thank you. Cam, same question. What is an appropriate course of action for university administrators to discourage obstructive student protesting in cases in which it indeed merits discouragement?
So my personal view on this is that freedom of speech is obviously key. It's a constitutional right, and so is freedom of assembly. If students think that something's wrong on campus, if they have a problem with how administration is handling an issue, yeah, they should protest. Like, I encourage that. Like, but at the same time, there has to be a line. And I think that line is drawn pretty clearly in the law. If you're occupying a building after hours and the police ask you to leave, while I understand that you're exercising your rights, I think that at the same time, like, there's a line that's there and you can only go so far. But I want to bring this into a part of a broader conversation about speech on college campuses. Right now, I think that college campuses they're a place where ideas come to be challenged. You don't grow by not challenging yourself. You don't grow by not challenging your ideas and your preconceived notions about how the world works. That's something that our college should be taking as seriously as we take student protests. That's something where we see we see the student body and we see the challenges that people bring to the administration, and we think that's a good thing. We think that right now there's a lot of things on our campus that should be changed, especially in terms of how student protests are handled. And as long as things aren't out of hand, they should be there. Like, that's something that we think is a good thing. But I want to make sure that people understand that ideas should be challenged, and that's something that needs to be reiterated and taken seriously on our campus.
Great, thank you. Adair and Sam, rebuttal.
While I do agree on the points of freedom of speech, this just goes to show the example of me and Abir actually having conversations with students, actually getting feedback and opinions. Student groups and students have approached us, and again, this is purely situational, on not feeling safe, and again, emphasizing that line between what is protesting peacefully and what is alienating student groups, certain populations, certain student populations, just being cognizant of the student voice and student safety, and understanding that while we represent and we do agree of freedom of speech, who doesn't, it's important for us to also be on the ground and actually getting full student perspective on do I not feel safe because of the certain actions that could be hidden on this campus.
And just a little addition to, of note, totally, right now, the line for the University of Minnesota is drawn on what they believe is proper protest and what they believe isn't proper protest. The only thing I will say is that students have a right always and forever to question that line, because we do come to a university to learn, right? We come to challenge each other, and I think also challenging how laws have been complacent and keeping people out is really important. There's a lot of people who've broken a lot of laws and changed lives. I'm not saying that every single protest that happens is revolutionary by any means, but I am saying that we should challenge each other, and we should challenge administration, and administration can challenge us, but then we have a right to draw our own conclusions from the situation.
Thank you. Rebuttal.
Yeah, so I would actually like Yeah. I would actually like to agree with Sam here. I think one of the conversations that I had actually with Sami Rahameen, who's sitting in the audience with us, was there was only one time that he hasn't felt safe on campus, and it was at the presentation by a Jewish-Israeli scholar where he was shouted down over in the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And that's just unacceptable. And I think that too is another way that we can define that line of what's acceptable student protest and what's not, and work with administrators to make sure that that's a very clearly defined a line. And so I think I would have to agree, like, as soon as students stop feeling safe when protests are happening, that's another way to determine, like, where the line can be drawn.
Great, thank you. We'll go on to question number 8. Again, rebuttals are recommended, however, not required. Abir. Students have raised concerns in recent months that MSA functions as an aristocracy. Which do you think this means, and what action does it require?
So utilizing my poli-sci major, aristocracy, I believe, is rule of the elite. Is anyone, okay, cool. That's nice. There was an op-ed. I'm being very honest here. There was one op-ed submitted to the Minnesota Daily that claimed that MSA functions as an aristocracy. They pulled a quote out of an interview I did last year with a friend of mine for the J School. Her name is Tiff. I don't know if she's in here. Where I said that I was attracted to systems of power that change things. And when that op-ed was submitted, I didn't respond to it. I didn't write anything in contrast because I would be putting a lot of myself out there for something that I didn't really particularly feel like was a well thought out argument. But if the point was that I'm attracted to power, I would just like to make it very clear that the reason I'm attracted to power, and that is a very strange phrasing of things, but let's just go with it. The reason I'm attracted to power is my whole life I've been kept out of systems like this. I went to President Kaler's office, and I had a very emotional moment where he told me that he feels like people who protest in his office hours are wasting his time and it's ineffective. And the reason I got emotional is because had I not fallen into student government very accidentally, had Joelle not liked my interview and accepted me as an intern, had she not picked me as her VP, I wouldn't have this opportunity to talk to these important, powerful people the way I do now. These are people like me don't get to be in these positions. Little brown girls don't get to do these types of things. And that's, again, me being honest. My mom didn't get to do these types of things. My mom doesn't know who to talk to when she feels like her student is being, her child is being treated unjustly. And that's something I have access to now. So yeah, I'm attracted to systems of power that change things. The wording was change things because I want to make things better for the university, for students, for all people. Also on the idea that MSA is an aristocracy, I don't really know what about us is elite. If you feel it's elite, please let's talk. I want to work it out and we can change it.
Thank you. Tim, same question. Students have raised concerns in recent months that MSA functions as an aristocracy. What do you think this means and what action does it require?
So when this says students have raised concerns in recent months, this is a concern I have myself. It's one of the reasons why I'm running, to be completely frank. I think right now, student government is run by a very small group of people. I think that they have a vast control over what's been going on over the past couple years in student government, and I think that it has led to a culture that is less professional, as well as less productive. And what I mean by that is I think that too frequently, students who are well qualified to be members of student government, who can do great work for the students of this university, have been either left out of conversations or not talked to about their strengths and their skill set. And I think that right now it's really hurting the students. I think that we should operate more as a professional student government and less as a student group. That's something Nidhi and I take very seriously. If you look, for example, at the election last year, where there was a slate of candidates that ran under the Joelle and Abir campaign, they won almost every voting member seat in Forum. And while there are student group reps who also have votes, they essentially created a giant voting block, and Forum is supposed to be representative of the student body. And while I understand that those people were selected because of their diverse perspectives and backgrounds, when they all came together to run on one campaign, I think that creates an elite system. I think that's exactly what that's exactly what it does. It doesn't represent necessarily every student because it's been handpicked. It's been a handpicked group of people. Additionally, I think that flowed over into some of the elections that took place in Forum last year, and I think that's something that Nidhi and I really strongly want to avoid. We want to make sure that the best and most qualified person will get the job, whether that's in our administration or as a committee director or any other position at MSA.
In terms of the slate, I would say there are benefits and cons to a slate. That's why we didn't do one this year. I do agree on that. It could be alienating. It is a democracy. The whole point of the slate was to increase the activity of people actually running. On the point of being less professional, I want you to talk to Nick Wilson, our government relations director, and tell me if he's not professional. I think there are plenty of people in this organization that have set the bar so high, and that's rude to say. But again, I would go ahead and talk to staff and decide that for yourselves. The third point being, I would even like to rebuke a beer on the fact of MSA being elite. We can have differing opinions, right? I would agree that, in effect, MSA has historically been competitive. There are a lot of students that want to accomplish things. It could be seen as elitist. I can talk a little bit more about that in the next question, but there have been steps by me personally taking our organization internally and adding student representation, not just in diversity, but also, I would say, even introverts like me, if you could talk to me at all, giving students that want to work hard that opportunity, and that is something I've done.
Do we still have time? Okay. The only other thing I will add to is the criticism of the slate, totally valid. I internalized it. I took that criticism. We don't have a slate. We are not interfering with democracy. Understood. The idea about being less professional is definitely something I feel very strongly against. Ask Callie, ask Nick, ask our GLA team, ask everyone else. As well as the idea of a small group of people, I encourage people to consider our committees and our general membership and our forum and talk about how many things we collaborate on.
Great. Rebuttal?
So I'd like to give just a little bit more evidence, maybe, for those who aren't necessarily in the room right now, but there are a handful of freshman interns that I can see sitting in the audience in the first few rows here, and I'd like to point out to those of you who can't see, almost all of them are wearing a Beer and Sam t-shirts. I think while Sam has done a good job being the director of the member development programs, I think that's important to see, that right now they're building a culture that is elite, that's focused on them. And I really do think that that's something that shouldn't be a part of MSA. I think that that's something that we should be focusing on bringing in as much of the student body as possible. We should be focusing on using forum as the true voice of the student body, since it's much more representative as a whole than the executive board. And I think that's something that Nidhi and I really do want to change.
I think also just the lack of diversity of thought sometimes when you all are supporting one person can definitely be brought into light here, where we all are thinking the same way because we all support the same person, and that I think is dangerous if we're wanting to be representative and inclusive of everyone on our campus, because I genuinely don't think that we can be if that's how we're going to go about it from now on with student government.
Great, thank you. We will be taking a short break, so the audience and candidates as well can use the restrooms and just take a second to rest. We will give you guys 5 minutes.
welcome back to the 2016 election debates. All right, so we will be going into the vice presidential questions. Question number 9, since Abir and Sam on the coin, we will be starting again with them. For these, there are no rebuttals. For this one, there is no rebuttal. Sam, in your time as a student at the U, what are you most proud to have accomplished?
Yeah, I think on a personal level, I got into running. That marathon training class, I started that, and that was really cool. So running 26, it's not funny, running 26 miles is hard. So that was just very mentally challenging to run 26 miles. So that was really cool, and continuing that. On a professional level, in terms of MSA, I think everything I've done has been completely internal. For the last 2 years, I've recruited our interns. When I started off as an intern, I would say the culture of the organization and the representation was white males, like vast majority. Right now, over a third of our interns are underrepresented in people of color. That is huge. And that is something I have the pleasure of doing and developing them. I set a precedent for training them professionally in terms of building their resumes, professional communication. I challenge you to talk to any of our interns at this point and tell me that they're not professional. That is, I want you to talk about that. I set a precedent for our committee directors, actually training them on professional communication with administrators and other people, teamwork, team management, project management, that has been set in the last 2 years of what I've done, and that's, I think, you look at external opinions and you can see between candidates that we agree on a lot of the same things. It is student issues and we agree a lot, but I think the core of how an organization truly functions well is full representation, and that's what I've accomplished with the beer.
Great, thank you. Lee, in your time as a student at the U, what are you most proud to have accomplished?
So I think the main thing that I talked about was my real world political experience. And I think the biggest thing that I'm proudest of is working for Governor Dayton. I was one of like 2 policy interns that were undergrads. I was working with law students, I was working with master's students, and it was me. And there were 5 of us. And I think that when I was there, I was able to develop these relationships with senators and with legislators and with lobbyists, and I was really able to cultivate friendships and cultivate this idea of who I am and learn from them. And I think that having that sort of an experience really, honestly, like, is cool. Most undergrads don't get that opportunity. Like, they don't. Most 20-year-olds don't get to talk to people who are in power, who are doing things, and being able to have an influence, being able to work for Governor Dayton, being able to help allocate his transportation budget of what, like a couple $1 million? Like, that's ridiculous. And like being able to say that I can put my name on that I helped do that, is just absolutely incredible. And like, when it comes to running, when it comes to actually like applying that, I think that those relationships, those that I've fostered, and those friendships are going to come in handy. And I think that honestly, they're everything. And I think that is something that really sets us apart. And I think that it's something that we are going to be able to utilize, and we're going to be able to make the lives of students better because we have that.
Great, thank you. And on to question 10. Sam, what in the past academic year do you think MSA might have done better?
That's a really good question. I think going back to sexual assault, I think that's a particular issue that we could focus on. I love the policy that was set going forward, but sexual assault knowledge is something that's rooted deep. That is something that is cultural. That is something, again, what Abir was referring to is what education, but also leaders in the community need to step up and talk about. Not just us as president and vice president, but leaders of underrepresented communities, leaders of Greek life. I want to bring in and collaborate with people on who are going to be the leaders, the models for those conversations. I talked to someone recently about, for example, Greek life and the idea of sexual assault and how do people deal with victims? What are the conversations that we have with victims? And I would say it's not great right now. And it's things that need to be changed that are, again, rooted deeply in what we subconsciously think about. When someone comes to me, what am I going to say? What are going to be those conversations? And it's deep programming. It's something that, like we said, a policy can't just change overnight.
Great, thank you. And Vinny, what in the past academic year do you think MSA might have done better?
I think students face a lot of problems when they come to campus, and I think that student government needs to address a lot of them. And one thing that Cam and I are planning on doing, one thing that we have laid out and we've talked about a couple of times is really this year-long, school year-long plan that really addresses sexual assault, and it incorporates Greek life, it incorporates the Aurora Center, it incorporates counseling, it creates peer-to-peer trainings, it has these different ideas that we're able to actually implement. And then we talk about mental health. And then we do the same thing. We incorporate Active Minds. We incorporate all of these different organizations. We incorporate the Greek Task Force. We incorporate the multicultural students who are sometimes, personally, sometimes I don't want to talk about my mental health. I don't want to talk about it with my parents. But we're able to create those sorts of conversations, and we're allowing them to have those conversations. We have the same conversations about inclusion, where we work with different groups. Basically, we make every month of the school year a different issue. We continue these conversations year long, and I think that that's something MSA has definitely struggled with. And I think that when Cam and I are elected, we're going to do a great job making sure that we acknowledge the different issues that students are facing, and we do a comprehensive job.
Great, thank you. This ends the questions that we have formulated for them. But before we take questions from the audience, the candidates have prepared a question for each other to be answered. They will each have 3 minutes. The first question is from Beer and Sam, and they have asked, what student initiatives have you accomplished? Beer and Sam, if you would like to answer.
For sure. Do you want me to, we can do a back and forth if you
Yeah.
remember. So student-driven initiatives are really important to Sam and I. And Sam and I philosophically believe that if there is something for MSA to improve on, it's continuing even greater collaboration than we have already. So we've focused a lot on outreaching the student body. This year I headed up student group outreach, where I met with 70 student groups individually and reached out and had conversations with over 800 students across that span. We also send out campus-wide polls, and those are incredibly important for us to be able to translate into actionable items that students actually care about. So some of the initiatives that we've accomplished, and mind you, everything I'm about to say, no one did alone. We did it with many, many people, including members of the organization who I might forget to give a shout out to. But that includes things like the new bus routes, bike racks. There are things like the Sustainability's Priorities proposal that allows us to give feedback on how we want to see sustainability happen on campus. There is being put together a first-generation student group for student groups to be able to for students to be able to bring together all of the initiatives and all the resources that exist for first-gen students. What else have we worked on?
There's a full list at abirandsam.org/successes. I would ask you to look there. Plug. But I would say that going forward, we have a perspective, we have context, we represent certain student groups, but we want to continually bring students together in the fact of we want student feedback. Our platform is completely student feedback driven, and I encourage you, if you don't know either one of us, or you feel like we're not representing you in some sort of way, to come to our office hours. I think it's huge. I learned so much from people just coming to me and talking to me about issues that they feel like are really important and things that can just be put under the rug. I fully acknowledge the idea of full representation. Obviously, we have our own initiatives and our own successes, but we want to encourage people to feel responsible for what the Minnesota Student Association is doing.
Yes. And on that note, too, we've had a lot of, yes, we've done things with a variety of people that are student-driven. The other thing to note, too, is that we're focused on how students can be uplifted and have agency over their own issues as well. So we believe in giving every student the right to navigate this bureaucracy as much as we can, which still isn't 100%, but any knowledge that we can provide to you all. We also believe in increasing student representation. So there were like 3 committees this year for people who function and exist solely for students that had no student representatives on it until we busted down the door a little bit. A really good example that I feel very strongly about is a Multicultural Center for Academic Excellence. They lost their director. Well, their director was fired, and there was a committee focused on them that didn't have a student representative until we asked for it. So student initiatives, feedback driven.
Great, thank you. Kennedy, the question is, what student-driven initiatives have you accomplished?
Absolutely. So going back to freshman year, I was player in the Campus Safety Initiative back when we had a string of assaults and thefts on campus. I took a key role, and I was a part of the publicity campaign for that. But more specifically, and I mean this very intentionally, I was a big part of the 9/11 rewrite resolution. There was a huge to-do about the first one that didn't pass in Forum when Forum decided we didn't want to have or encourage the administration to recognize a 9/11 with a moment of silence. And so afterwards, I approached the author Theo, who's with us tonight in the audience, and I said, hey, how can I help you write this to get this passed? I think this is a key issue that affects students. I think it makes a difference here on our campus. And so I sat down with him. I sat down with the other players that were interested and wanted to work on this issue, and we got it done. We got it passed. Additionally, I have done a lot over the course of the last year with my orientation leader experience. I took initiative to help students get accustomed to campus. Like that was something I really enjoyed, and that was something that I got a chance to meet people who I wouldn't have met otherwise. Like, I don't have a whole lot of interaction with students in CHD, but I got to meet a whole group of them and hear what their issues are and hear why they came to the U. And finally, I just want to mention my USLS outreach. I've taken the initiative to make sure that students are aware of University Student Legal Service and all the good that they provide for our campus.
Yeah, so also kind of like what we said earlier, I don't have MSA experience, but I'm president of the Undergraduate Consulting Club. And there I have done a job that UCC is a Carlson club, but it's also a CSE club. And it's kind of hard to connect students to consulting careers. So I have taken the steps to connect students to jobs. Like I work with the career centers, the CLA, the CSE, the CSOM. I work with all of them in order to make sure that students have access to whatever sort of career choice they want to when it comes to consulting, so they can talk to the different recruiters, so they're able to actually experience what consulting is. Last point.
And finally, we just want to mention that when we developed our platform as we have it, we developed it based on what students were telling us mattered to them. We were developing it based on the student initiatives that they wanted to see. And so I think that's important to make note of and notice that when we go forward in this next year, those are the things that students have talked to us about, and that's why we decided to include them on our platform, because they are student initiatives.
All right, thank you. We will now move on to the question that Cameron and you have prepared. Can you speak to the involvement in Greek life? Starting with Cameron.
Yeah, so Greek life is something that I definitely didn't think I was going to join when I was coming to school here. What I had heard from my friends who joined Greek life in Virginia was a lot of stereotypes and a lot of things that I did not want to be associated with. But when I got here, I found a really awesome community on campus. And I think that in my experience with Greek life, and being in Beta Theta Pi, it's had the opportunity to help me grow as a leader. Taking on responsibility for people in my chapter, from new member education to risk management, has allowed me to spread awareness about issues that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten to talk to people about. So like in my job as risk management, I'm making sure that students understand how to be active bystanders, how to make sure that like the drinking culture on campus can improve, how to make it better. And those are issues that I wouldn't have necessarily had interaction with otherwise. And I think having a community on campus that makes up 15 to 20%, and the administration has said they want to grow, has been a really cool experience for me. And I think Nidhi would probably say something similar too.
Yeah, and also I think that it's an important aspect that we can't forget about, especially when we're going to want to talk about how do we include Greek life in these conversations, how do we include these leaders, these active people who are involved in campus, how do we bring them into like mental health task force, sexual assault awareness, how do we talk about them? And I think that, like, I'm a Delta Gamma, Cam's a Beta Theta Pi, I think that that experience is going to be super useful, like, when we want to create those initiatives, because we are actually like a part of these communities.
Great, thank you. Sam and Veer, can you speak to your involvement in Greek life?
So neither Sam and I are currently members of Greek Life. We have never joined a sorority or anything of that nature. Greek Life has been one of our biggest collaborators in our time in MSA because it's such a cohesive group of people who often are working together towards really awesome initiatives. So in terms of the fact that we have collaborated with Greek Life and we continue to collaborate with Greek Life. So right now we have a Greeks Go Green task force initiative that's focused on how can we have sustainability advocates in the Greek houses right now. And we have awesome members that are working with us on that. We've worked with Greek Life on sexual assault and mental health as well. We also have a very strong presence of Greek members on our campaign team. We've had a strong presence of Greek members in our organization in the past, and in our organization in the future, it will absolutely be the case. So we have nearly every fraternity and sorority in IFC and Panhell are represented. We have talked with multicultural Greek Life, which I think is also a forgotten group of people sometimes, and on what their needs are. And they've been represented in our campaign as well. But most importantly, I think something to note is that having a ticket of 2 non-Greek people is actually unprecedented. That doesn't happen very often. I don't know the exact numbers, but we do know that in my time in MSA, every president or vice president has been Greek, which is awesome because Greek involvement is really, really cool. But when people say, we're an aristocracy of elites, historically, MSA has looked a certain way. MSA has looked a certain way, and maybe we don't look that way. And I'm not saying that I don't want Greek life involved, because I think Greek folks have done so much great work, especially on the outreach part of what we talk about, so that there's this one part of policy and another is outreach. They've done incredible work, but if you're saying we're elite too, I think it's pretty cool that, we're 2 not Greek people.
I would also like to go back to the 2 points of if you feel like we're not representing you in some sort of way, or you would like to have a conversation with us on some particular issue, I am always open. And again, I've had those conversations in the past and I will continue them for sure.
Great. Thank you. All right. We will now be moving on to questions from the audience. We have picked 3 questions from the audience, and we will read them to you. You will each have 2 minutes to answer them, and we will not be doing rebuttals to this.
You said 2 minutes to answer?
2 minutes,
Okay.
yes. All right. Veer and Sam. From David, a 4th year. How will you further social justice and diversity and inclusion on campus?
Ooh, I love diversity. I love diversity and social justice. That's a great question. A variety of ways. So there is, obviously, when we talk about diversity and social justice, one of the first things that comes to mind is race and ethnicity. And that's absolutely critical. It's something we are focused on, something that we have worked really long and hard on. In fact, we created the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. If people know my involvement in MSA, most of it has been diversity work. But moving forward, the other thing that I really want to focus on too is understanding the diversity is a diversity of anyone who is underrepresented, right? And one of the things that I think we would like to push for is something that we're including is campus diversity and social justice includes people who are not able-bodied, people who are not neurotypical, queer people, LGBT people, international students, non-native English-speaking students, mothers and parents in general, veterans. That's something I'm actually really critically interested in having is veteran representation in MSA, first gen, non-traditional. These are all populations that are usually not represented in student government, that are often have their voices go unheard, that usually need additional resources for something. We would like to work on them in a variety of cases. So it's not just going to be diversity and inclusion work, but that every initiative that we have, from mental health work to inclusion work to affordability work, is going to consider every single one of these populations in the problem, and that's intersectionality, right? We can't talk
And I think, like, at the end of the day, it includes diversity of thought and opinion too. That's something that Indy and I really want to bring to the table, and I'm gonna let her take over from here.
Essentially, we agree. Like, you can't talk about any issue without incorporating other groups. And like with our focus plan, like there's a reason that when we're talking about sexual assault, we're bringing in the LGBTQIA community. When we're going to talk to the international students. We're going to talk to these different groups, like the multicultural groups, the second floor groups, like Cam said. And I think that that laid out plan is going to be exceptionally helpful and useful when it actually comes to implementing our ideas.
Great, thank you. Olivia and Sam, how are international student issues addressed in your past MSA work and your platform?
Yes. No, I love these questions because I think this is so critical. We haven't had a chance really yet to talk about international students, and I feel very strongly, and I know Sam does too, in our time at MSA, we've worked on this and we've worked on this personally. So last year, I was very, very, very blessed to be a CA in the Students Crossing Borders Living Learning community. This is this incredible community of students who are both domestic and international. My co-CA, she's there, Miss Jane, a lot of my residents in the audience. I learned so much that I didn't know. And I'd like to think I have an international perspective because I am a global citizen. I was born one place, I've lived in a million others. I'm not a native English speaker, so I thought I had some understanding, but no, I don't know what I'm talking about until I had a chance to talk to these students. International students are erased constantly, and they're erased not just by the rest of the student body, but also by administration. So when we talk about this out-of-state tuition hike, it's important to say out-of-state and international tuition hike because they're all affected. In addition to that, some of the things we've done in the past, launch an international student advisory board that had gone dormant. We worked with people like Enoch and Janet on that. We have a very strong partnership with International Student and Scholar Services right now. Sam, do you want to talk about actually international students, interns and things?
Definitely just recruitment of interns, international students all the way. Just representation, full representation of the over 30 staff that are representing you. I think moving forward, just being, again, generally aware of not being aware or not knowing what you don't know or...
Yeah, no.
Yeah, words. Just one of my friends who's an international student came to me last week and was like, me and a bunch of international students went to Kaler, told him our issues, and he was complacent. And just having consistent conversations with your friends and not being open to the public and saying, moving forward, looking at this tuition hike, being aware of what the Board of Regents say and what that Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Cam and Nitty, how are international student issues addressed in your past MSA work and your platform?
Yeah, so in my past MSA work, I haven't had the opportunity to address them as much as I have had as an orientation leader last summer. I led 2 different groups of international students around campus and helped them get acclimated to all the resources and did my best to communicate with them effectively, like how to navigate this huge university that we're a part of. And so I think even just starting there, I've had some experience helping students understand how to get accustomed to campus. In terms of how it's addressed in our platform, I really want to talk more about mental health. In our recent conversation that we had with student counseling services, they said that one of the most underserved populations to the mental health resources is international students, whether that's because they have different stigmas because of their culture or because of the communication barriers that can sometimes be faced. They're one of the most chronically underserved student groups, or groups of students here on campus in terms of mental health. So that's something that we want to be doing a better job connecting students to resources with. In terms of addressing mental health here on our campus. But that goes for other things too, including sexual assault. We want to make sure that international students are just as aware of affirmative consent and other policies in being an active bystander as every other student is here on campus. And we think that MSA has a major role to play in that. But we want to make sure that it's not just MSA that's focusing on it. We want to work with MK. We want to work with ISSS. We want to work with the cultural centers once again and make sure that the groups of students who need to know about these issues and like have a tougher time getting them are being able to understand them. I think like I've had that experience too. I lived in Germany for a year, and like it's so hard to understand when somebody's telling you in a different language, like, hey, you need to do this, hey, you need to do this, hey, you need to do this. And so I personally, I understand like kind of where they're coming from, and we want to make sure that MSA is doing what we can to make those issues, or to address those issues.
Thank you. All right, our final audience question, Amir and Sam. The Minnesota legislature is currently considering a bill that would make it illegal for transgender people to use bathrooms corresponding to their gender identity in many places, including public universities. If elected, what will you do to protect the rights of transgender students?
Yes. So structurally, the first thing to note is one of the convenient things about the university in this particular case is that we're constitutionally autonomous. So if Minnesota were to do something as despicable as make it difficult for people who already live such difficult lives to be able to go use the bathroom, we have the opportunity here at the University of Minnesota to say, hell no. That's not going to happen. We need to increase gender-neutral bathrooms. Binary bathrooms also don't just hurt trans people and non-binary people and non-gender conforming people. They hurt people with disabilities, they hurt people who have children, they hurt a variety of other populations as well. They exist inherently right now as an inconvenience to so many people. We have to work on a culture of inclusivity as well as a structure of inclusivity. So if this were to happen, which on our own time, we're all gonna be out there at the legislature making sure that doesn't happen, and Governor Dayton has taken a strong stance against them, so bless him for that. Despicable, it will not happen on this campus, and if anyone tries to bring it forward, that is going to be something that we are going to put an incredible amount of resources and time and energy into, because our students absolutely cannot feel that level of exclusion and oppression on this campus.
Thank you. Caminiti, if elected, what will you do to protect the rights of transgender students?
To be completely honest, I'm not sure if I can accurately answer that question better than Abir just did. Really, everything she said is completely accurate. There's no place for this on our campus. We are one of the most frequently ranked as one of the most gender and LGBTQ friendly campuses in the country. And neither Nidhi or I wants to see that changed. I know, like, I have talked to students who came here because of the city of Minneapolis, because how accepting of a culture it is here. I mean, the fact that, and I guess this is going a little bit back to Greek life, but there are openly gay members of our Greek community that are very accepted. And frankly, that's something that elsewhere in the country is unheard of. And so I think, like, looking at that culture that we have here on campus, I want to make sure that that culture is progressive and stays moving forward and doesn't try and revert back to a culture of oppression that the legislature might be considering. And so I think, like I said, Abir's answer was fantastic, and I really feel that Nidhi and I are on the same page.
Great, thank you so much. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes. Each candidate party will each have 3 minutes for closing statements. We will start with a beer and Sam.
We started with a beer and Sam for everything. All right, do you want to start? I want to give you this.
You've heard us talk a lot. Actions speak louder than words. I cannot say that enough. I think it's just like interviewing someone. It's what have you done in the past? What are your qualifications? How have you shown action to the work that you have said that you're going to do? And I think that's really important, and I encourage people to hear the stories of people that have worked with us and collaborated with us. And I think if you don't know us, please meet me. I want to fully represent you, and I could say this, and a beer has said this before, we don't know anything when we get into this position and we understand that. And that is a growing learning curve, and it's something that I can only tackle as a learning curve when I hear this opinion. So,
If you look through our platform, everything that we care about cannot be encompassed in this platform, and everything members of our organization who will be coming in care about cannot be encompassed in the platform. So what we put on the platform are things that I feel comfortable telling every single one of you that we know how to get done. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I'm going to get 100% of it done in this organization, but we can lay the groundwork and the infrastructure for every single one, and we will. I am currently the vice president. We ran on a platform. We've accomplished nearly everything on it. If you go back to that link, we updated frequently, and we sent out a campus-wide email talking about where we were at. That said, we have to work with a lot of people. There are folks who are stakeholders across this university who have to help us, and it's not a student's single-handed job to fix mental health. It's not students' single-handed job to end campus sexual assault. It is a collaborative effort with all university stakeholders. So check out our platform. I'm going to do the Bernie Sanders Hillary thing at abeerandsam.org/platform, and you guys can go check out everything we have on it.
and we're excited to represent you. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim and Nidhi.
Our question when we set out to run for MSA President VP, the driving question behind our campaign and behind student government as we see it is what issues affect the day-to-day lives of students, and how can MSA make students' lives better based on those day-to-day life-affecting issues. That's what we want to focus on. We believe that our combined experience, both in MSA as a student senator and outside of MSA in real-world political experience, is the best way that we can achieve our goals of making students' lives better. I can talk all day about my experience. I could talk all day about our platform and what we want to see changed on campus. But at the end of the day, you can see online, you can see if you talk to us, what we stand for and what we've done in the past 3 years on campus to try and make it better.
Our goal is for tangible, real-world, practical things that we can actually apply when we get elected. We want to make sure that when we say things, we can actually go forward and we can implement them. That's why we're talking to Boynton. That's why we're talking to the Aurora Center. That's why we're talking to all of these people. And we're making sure that when we get into office, we can take the steps needed to make lives of students better. And I think that, like Cam said, our collective experience, like the fact that I'm not an insider in MSA, the fact that I have those connections when it comes to lobbying, when it comes to addressing tuition, when it comes to all of these different issues, and the fact that these aren't just talking points to us, I think really is going to do a great job. And it's why we're running. It's why we are going to do a good job when we win.
So yeah, I hope that after the debate tonight, you've seen where we stand on the issues and where Abir and Sam stand on the issues. And so I want to thank everybody who's here. I want to thank ACEC again for hosting the debate. And thank you for everybody who has been watching online too. Voting's next week. Thank you, everyone.